Hello and welcome to Aero Innovations. I'm Aero and I'll be your host this evening. If you're new to the channel, I specialize in low stakes, no limit hold'em. I analyze every hand I play from the perspective of a poker professional who's been in the game over a decade and a half. If you're looking to crush low stakes, no limit hold'em, then you've come to the right place. Tonight I'm going to feature a double header of 2 sessions I played, one night after the next. So sit back and enjoy the action and commentary. The first session takes place Wednesday night, January the 23rd, although technically it's Thursday morning since we don't start until 12:35 in the morning. As usual, we're playing 2-5 no limit hold'em at the Wynn Encore in Las Vegas, where I bind for $1,500, which is 300 big blinds. A few minutes into the session, I open to 20 with pocket 9s in the hijack. Only the small blind and big blind call. The flop comes 7, 10, 4, with 2 spades and a heart. The action checks to me. With pocket 9s, I may or may not have the best hand right now, but I'd like to find out. There's only one overcard to my pair, and it's not necessary that one of my opponents is actually holding it. Since it's such a draw-heavy board, I go for some thin value and shoot out a c-bet of $25. Small blind folds, but the big blind calls. The turn brings in a 6 of diamonds, strengthening our hand to include a gut shot draw, but 8-9 does make the nuts. My opponent checks again. If he only has a weak hand here with a hand like 10-jack or 10-queen or some such, I think I can get him to fold by the river, and if he's on a draw, I would like to charge him for that draw. I keep the heat on with a substantial bet of $80 into the pot of 110. Suddenly, my opponent puts in a sneaky check raise to 225 with the large stack of over $1,500 that covers me. What's he trying to represent here? Is he saying he has 8-9? I find that hard to believe considering I'm holding pocket 9s. 10-6 doesn't make a whole lot of sense. 4-6 or 6-7 suited might. I think those are the most likely candidates of hands that currently have me beat, to be honest. The raise amount is not very big though. Those sorts of hands will normally want to raise just a tiny bit bigger since those hands are easily counterfeited. Something just doesn't smell right with this raise amount, and we do have outs to improve, so I make the call. The river is a queen of spades, which may or may not be a bad thing, depending upon what our opponent does. If he checks, I plan to smash this river pretty massively and use it as a scare card. Instead, our opponent throws out an incredibly strong bet of $600, which is a slight overbet. I have just over $1,200 in my stack. I contemplate my options for a moment. There's no way our opponent can have us beat on the turn and still smash this river this hard unless he very specifically has 10-6 of spades. Either he had us on the turn and should be terrified of this river, or he was trying to scare us off on the turn with some sort of really high equity combo draw, but he didn't actually get there until just now. I have enough in my stack that if I shove here, I might be able to scare off a really good thinking player because my play should look ridiculously strong. But unfortunately, I'm not holding any blockers to the nuts. There's no reason why my opponent can't have a hand like ace-8 of spades here, for instance. Plus, I don't think the vast majority of recreational players are willing to fold their flushes, no matter how low they are. So with these thoughts in mind, I come to the conclusion that my initial read was most likely right, that we probably still had our opponent beat on the turn, and he just got there big time on the river, so I make the fold. I later asked my opponent what he had this hand, and he was nice enough to reveal he was holding 8-6 of spades for a massive combo draw that did in fact get there on the river. I'm really curious how this hand would have played out if the river had been a random break, and if I'd been able to sniff out the bluff to make a huge hero call, or if our opponent would have just given up, since he does have a shred of showdown value. 5 minutes later, under the gun opens to 15. The cutoff calls. I call in the big blind for 10 more with ace-6 offsuit. The flop comes king, 6-5, with 2 hearts and a spade. We flop middle pair and not a whole lot else. Still, there's a good chance we're good right now. I start with a check. Under the gun c-bets another stale bet of 15. The cutoff folds. Okay, so real talk. For my audience that plays 1-3 and 2-5, do you have a single strong hand in your entire arsenal that would ever c-bet 15 on a board that is this dynamic? Because I sure as shite don't. Even with pocket kings, I'm betting bigger. This board is just way too dynamic and wet. There's multiple straight draws as well as the obvious flush draw, and our opponent was also betting while trapped between 2 different players. That bet was just way too weak. Our opponent most likely has a draw of some sort, so I put in the check raise to $60. Our opponent makes the call. The turn brings in a very dreamy ace of clubs. We improve to aces up, which is a very good thing from my perspective. Doesn't it feel so nice when you put in a check raise with middle pair and then suddenly turn two pairs? Because I'm pretty euphoric right now. So I continue the pressure with an 80% pot size bet of 135 into the pot of 165. Again, our opponent makes the call. The river brings in a 5 of clubs, pairing bottom pair. Alright, here I have two options. If our opponent had a hand like King Jack or King 10 or some such, I think my bet on the turn should have gotten a fold out of him the vast majority of the time, but he still made the call. So either he's super sticky, or he did in fact have a draw of some sort like I surmised. Well, this river breaks out all of the draws. If I check here, he might stab at the pot, but I find that most players aren't gutsy enough to do that. On the other hand, if our opponent had a hand like the ace high flush draw, this wouldn't be the worst river for him. He counterfeits a hand like King 6 suited, and he also has a great bluff catcher if he suspects I actually had some sort of draw too, like a smaller flush draw or 7-8 for a missed open ender or some such. I think both of my options have a very low chance of making anything, in all honesty. So faced with that reality, I may as well get greedy and hope for the best, right? I shoot out a terrifying overbet to the tune of 525 into the pot of 435. Unfortunately, our opponent pretty quickly makes the fold. Here I open to 15 in the middle position with Jack Queen of clubs. The low jack 3 bets me to 50 with a full stack of 1500. He's an Asian pro I've battled a couple of times previously. It's only $35 more for me to call, so I think I have a pretty clear call here. The flop comes 6, 8, queen, all diamonds. We flop top pair, but I'm not loving all those diamonds. Still, the board is pretty disconnected otherwise. I start with a check. Our opponent fires out another stagnant c-bet of $50. We have a ton of hands we beat here, so I make the call. The turn brings in a 4 of diamonds, putting 4 diamonds on board. If our opponent so much as breathes into this pot, I'm out. I don't even care if he's bluffing. So I check again. Thankfully, that doesn't happen. Our opponent checks as well. There's some chance we could be good here. The river is a 6 of clubs, pairing bottom pair. We do have showdown value, but I would hate to lose to a tiny diamond here in case our opponent was 3-betting light with any array of combinations that contain a small diamond, which he's more than capable enough of doing. I decide to lead with a half pot bet of $100. Suddenly, our opponent raises to 400. Okay, I'm confused. Is he saying he has the ace of diamonds? Why didn't he bet on the turn? Surely he doesn't have top boat here while holding the last 2 queens. Maybe he was luring me into this very same trap. Still, I think I can represent a much stronger hand than just a naked diamond. I have removal to top boat, and I could also very easily have a hand like pocket 8s here, which I would have played exactly the same like how the hand has gone so far. If I were in his shoes, and I met super massive resistance, like the kind I'm about to exhibit, I know that I would fold the ace of diamonds.
Hey! No! Stop! Just calm down! Don't do it!
So, taking all of this into consideration, I throw out yet another raise to 1100, which unfortunately backfires in my face as my opponent makes the call in less than 10 seconds. I table my hand, and he shows ace 3 of diamonds for a flopped flush. Wow, I thought a flush, even the ace high flush, would have thought about this call for more than a few seconds. With this loss, we're stuck $1,238 less than 30 minutes into the session. This is not such a good way to start the night. 45 minutes later, I've since switched tables. We're currently 6-handed. I was sandwiched between 2 pros on that last table, and that's not particularly where I want to be. Here I open to 20 in the hijack with my least favorite premium starting hand. Oh yes, we're talking about the accursed pocket kings. The cutoff folds, but the button 3-bets me to 70 with a stack of about 900. Semi-short stack? Perfect. Maybe he's willing to get it all in pre-flop. I 4-bet to 190, giving him a terrible price to set mine. Well, my opponent doesn't go all in, but he does make the call. The flop comes Jack, 8, 10 with a diamond and 2 clubs. This is a nightmare flop. My viewers who mostly play lower stakes, you may think this is a great flop since all the cards are lower than a king and there's no ace out there.
Very nice words, but happens to be wrong.
But the reason that I say this is a terrible flop is that of the likely hands that would 3-bet me pre-flop and still call a 4-bet but not shove all in, usually you're looking at pocket 10s or jacks, and they're both on this freaking board. I'm only beating very specifically pocket 9s or pocket queens, but I think queens would have just shoved pre-flop with his semi-short stack. And even 9s is not very far behind me here with 10 outs. You always need to keep your opponent's range in mind. We're still ahead of hands like ace-queen suited and the rare ace-king, but that's much less likely considering we're blocking 2 of the kings. So against the array of hands that my opponent could be holding, I think pot control here is much more important than worry about giving our opponent a free card. So I start with a check. Thankfully, our opponent checks the action back. The turn brings in an ace of hearts. King-queen makes the nuts, and many of the hands we were previously beating, we no longer beat. I'm pretty much done with this hand. I check again, with intentions of folding to any real bet. But our opponent does not in fact throw out a real bet. He puts out a bet of 125 into the pot of 385, which is just under a third pot bet. I don't know what to think about this bet. Is our opponent trying to get us to fold a hand like kings or queens, using the ace as a scare card? Does he really have a hand like pocket 9s, and is just making a semi-bluff? I think I'm losing to the vast majority of hands our opponent could be holding right now, but for this price, I can't fold just yet. We have quite a few outs to improve against a set, so let's reevaluate after the river. So I stick in the 125. So the river comes, and it's an 8 of diamonds, pairing bottom pair. We do not in fact improve, so of course all I can do is check. Suddenly, our opponent goes all in for his remaining stack of about 600. And of course, all I can do is fold. Our opponent was nice enough to reveal that he had pocket freaking 8s for a flopped set and rivered quads. The curse of freaking kings strikes again. Thankfully, the board texture on the flop and turn definitely saved us from giving our opponent a full double up. Still, we're stuck over 1500 at this point, and we're barely an hour into the session. 20 minutes later, that short-handed table breaks, so I get moved back to our original table, which is currently 8-handed. I'm in a better position than before, and the Asian pro who destroyed us earlier has since moved tables. Here, under the gun and middle position both limp. I raise to 35 with pocket queens, increasing my normal raise amount to account for the 2 limpers. Everyone else folds, but the 2 limpers both call. The flop comes jack, 7, 8, rainbow. Alright, not bad. We flop an overpair on a rainbow board. Both players check to me. Here I want to target a naked jack. We're squashed against a set of 7s or 8s, so as opposed to going for max value, I need to find out where we're at. I start with a tentative c-bet of 65. Under the gun calls, but the middle position check raises to 210 with a stack of about 1100. Okay, I need to think about this one. I tank for almost a full minute. In the short time I've been on this table, I would identify the under the gun limper as pretty loose. So, in the best case scenario, the middle position is trying to isolate the under the gun player by kicking me out. Why such a large raise though? From 65 to 210 is pretty massive. Would a set make such a play? I know 7-8 would. Bottom 2 pairs is a pretty vulnerable hand. Regardless, I'm only beating a naked jack here, which would be an incredibly brazen move for our opponent to make. If he had a hand like ace-jack, I think he would have just raised the pot himself pre-flop. I'm losing to a set of 7s, 8s, or the various combinations of 2 pairs. Normally, this would just be a pretty easy fold for me, but I'm still pretty mad about the pocket king's hand, as well as the jack-queen of clubs bluff that didn't get through. Am I seriously about to lose with pocket queens, right after just losing with pocket kings? This is pretty freaking tilting, so I take longer than usual to think this one through. But in the end, I still come to the conclusion that I can only fold here. So that's what I do, and the under the gun player does as well. So before he leaves, the middle position aggressor was nice enough to allow me to conduct an interview about what he had this hand, and this is what he had to say. So that one hand, 7-8 jack, You check raise to 210.
Yep.
What did you have there?
I had the straight. Well, the straight.
I folded pocket queens to you that hand. What do you think about that fold?
It was a good fold, primarily because you had someone behind you. But 25. It's a tough spot. I mean, I could easily be doing that with ace jack there, trying to protect the jack. But I mean, it's not really worth getting into mixed up in a big pot on that board texture. So,
What made you decide to raise on a rainbow board with the nuts?
I thought that you actually had an overpair and was hoping that you would stick it in.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. 40 minutes later, we've lost several players, so we're currently playing only 5-handed. Here, I open to 20 under the gun with ace-queen offsuit. Jordan, a fellow professional poker player at the Win, makes the call on the button. This is the first hand we've gotten involved in tonight, so Jordan asks if this is going to be a big one. The flop comes king, 3-6, rainbow. We flop absolute squadouche. However, this is a pretty dry board, and that king favors our range. It's also very possible our opponent doesn't have anything either. Also, when the table comes down to short-handed, I lean much more towards c-betting with my entire range. So here, I fire out a tiny down bet to $15. For that small price, Jordan makes the call. The turn is a deuce of spades, not helping us whatsoever. 4-5 makes the nuts. I continue my story that I have a big hand and fire out another bet of 55. Again, Jordan makes the call. The river brings in a 3 of spades, pairing the board. I still only have ace high. However, in short-handed play, it's very common for players to call very lightly. Jordan has only invested $90 so far. So let's see if he's willing to put in quite a substantial amount more with what I suspect is only a bluff catcher. I think he has a hand like king 10 or king jack here. So I fire out a massive toe-curling overbet to the tune of $300 into the pot of 185. Up until this point, I have shown nothing but massive confidence and strength in my hand. You can listen to the final tidbits of audio from our duel. He's reviewing in his head what we could have. Well, Aero said, if I bet, he's just gonna fold. And then on this river, he suddenly comes out pounding. What the hell is this dude doing? So after going into the tank for 2 full minutes, Jordan eventually makes the fold, and we get our first big bluff of the night through. Jordan, I know you watch my vlogs. Sorry, buddy. I just had total air here. The very next hand, I come back from the restroom and post in the small blind. It folds around to the button who opens to 20, with position to the only person left in the hand, which is me. If you watch enough of my videos, you should know that open raises against the blinds can be extremely wide. With pocket 9s, I'm not about to let that happen. I put in a 3-bet to 85, which should fold out most random hands. The button argues that he has a real hand though, as he makes the call. The flop comes 3 ace-6 rainbow. This is not necessarily a bad flop. There's only one overcard to our pair, and the button could have called our 3-bet with a whole host of hands that doesn't necessarily include an ace. So I start with a check. Thankfully, the action checks around. The turn is an 8 of spades, putting 2 spades on board. I figure it's about time to get some value from our hand, so I lead with a decently strong bet of 100 into the pot of 170. I'm targeting a random 8 or the backdoor flush draw. Our opponent makes the call. The river is a 4 of diamonds. The flush breaks out, but a hand like 5-7 suited does make the nuts. I think we still have the best hand though. At this point, I'm very specifically targeting a hand like pocket 7s or a naked 8. So I shoot out another bet of 225 into the pot of 370. You don't always need a super massive hand to go for thin value. This is not a bluff, guys. I am not trying to represent that ace. I am very much going for value here. Here, listen to the original audio as I try to goad our opponent into making the call. We have bricked out completely. Let's see what he does. He lets it go, folks. He lets it go. And we're going to show him a random card here. Which one doesn't matter. Let's show him a random card. 20 minutes later, there's a live 10. Jackie, a 5'10 professional and the son of Young Lee, whom I've featured many times on the vlog so far, raises to 25 on the button. The small blind folds, but I call with 7-9 of spades in the big blind. The straddle calls us well. We go 3 ways out of position to flop of deuce, 8, jack, rainbow with 1 spade. We flop a gut shot straight draw with the backdoor flush draw. The action checks around to Jackie, who puts in a c-bet to $40. I make the call, and the straddle does as well. The turn is a 6 of hearts, keeping the board deliciously rainbow and improving our hand to a very sneaky double gut shot. The action checks again to Jackie, who continues with another bet of 125. If he has a real hand here, we might get paid massively if we hit, especially if the river is a random 5, because there's no way anyone could think that 5 helps us at all, considering the board texture on the flop. But since Jackie is a 5-10 pro, there's also a very good possibility he's just blasting with air. Our hand has doubled in potential outs, so there's no way I'm folding now, so I do make the call. Unfortunately, the straddle folds, decreasing our implied odds if we hit. And boy do we hit. The river is a 5 of spades. We make the freaking nuts, hitting the back door to one of our gorgeous outs that we didn't originally have on the flop. The board hasn't changed a whole lot, so I think it makes the most sense to check here, hoping that Jackie either has a real hand or will just overbet this river with complete air. So I check. But unfortunately, Jackie gives up and just checks back. Oh man, I finally make a hand and we don't get paid out. This session is really sucking so far. So I table our hand, still thankful to win a pot for a change. Hey, what's up guys, Aero here. So as you may or may not know, I am a live cash game specialist. For the most part, I've been avoiding the online scene. Back during COVID, all the casinos here in Vegas shut down, so I tried playing poker online. I was playing on Bet Online, and I sucked, like really bad. I found that I could not use my skills in live cash game to, it doesn't translate to online poker. People had too much of an edge, with the use of real-time assistance and these HUDs. Like they get all your stats, they know exactly your bluff percentages and in what spots you have, and what spots you actually have real hands. And I couldn't even beat the 1-2 game. I was like, what the freak is this? I played much bigger live cash. I played 2-5, I played 5-10, I played all the way up to 10-25 in Oceanside, and I can't beat 1-2 online. I was like, okay, I got to find something else during this COVID thing. So then a few years ago, I was invited by a few of my backers to play online poker again. And I told them, like, I'm not really good. I couldn't even beat 1-2 with all these technology and people's advantages. And my backers said, it's okay. Aero, check out this, this poker app we use. This is like a club poker. It's not the same as mass online poker where everyone can just play, and they're using a bot. You're competing with bots. I didn't know what the heck bots were. I was getting destroyed by bots because they play like perfect poker. They analyze your play and they can beat you. And I said, okay, I'm just gonna let you know. Don't think I'm gonna do that well, but they said, don't worry about it, we got your back. So I agreed to come on. I was at a 60-40 split where anything I made, I keep 60 and my backers kept 40. And I was like, I don't have anything to lose. It's not my own money, so sure. So we used a poker app called Poker 2. And for the first few weeks, I did really good. But then I got into a few really suspicious hands. Like the most notable one, I had pocket twos. The board flopped ace high and it turned a flush. And I turned my hand into a bluff. I check raised all in. My opponent called on a flush board, possible board with an ace out there with pocket threes. And I was like, in all the years I've been playing live poker, this is not a possible call. This is ridiculous. He's able, I've heard suspicions around it that sometimes in online poker, especially in sites and apps that aren't as well encrypted, they can see your cards. And I'm like, this is a perfect example. This is freaking an impossible call. You cannot call me here with pocket threes on a board with an ace high and a flush, and also the same opponent, I saw him all the time in the 2-5 game. Or rather, I was playing 3-6 online at the time, sitting there with over $10,000 in a game where you can only max buy-in for $1,000. And every time I see him, he has over $10,000. And then I'm recalled every hand I played with him, in the past, and like the only, when it came down to showdown, the only times he ever called me, I was never ahead. Like for instance, aces versus kings, or I have top and he's calling me a middle pair. He was always on a draw. It's not like I ever had the better hand and he didn't have massive outs. So I was like, yeah, this is suspicious as heck. I'm not going to do this anymore. So for the most part, I've been avoiding the online scene. I wasn't sure about the security of it. I wasn't sure, I didn't think I could beat people with the edge they have using real-time assistance and whatnot. However, recently, I am okay with endorsing 2 different online clubs now. That's because they're not using these smaller apps. They're on safer sites, and it's still club-style poker. The reason I mentioned club-style poker and the difference with like on regular online poker where anyone can join, you have to be personally invited with club poker, and the transaction that goes on, you have an agent that takes you into the club, and if you're doing weird, suspicious things, they can kick you. Like for instance, these clubs that I represent, I can kick you if I don't like if I get complaints from other players that like you're doing, these plays are really suspicious, or you're sorry to say, if you're just crushing all the time. We really don't want online killers playing with the general population, because it's not fun for people just losing all the time. So I have 2 clubs I endorse now. They're both for GG Poker, so Club GG. So it's a lot safer when you're playing with a big company. So I endorse the club, the Cheddar Club, and fellow poker vlogger North Cal Poker. He runs a regular weekly meetup where he gives $100 to the largest stack. A friend of mine, he has awesome 1-3 vlogs, so check him out. I'll have the link below. And I also endorse the High Roller Club. So I am personally going to start doing some online streaming and some meetup games myself when I have some time. I'm booked for a few weeks, but after that I'll try to put in some time. And so if you want to play with North Cal Poker, you want to play with me, come join us on GG Poker. You can, the Cheddar Club and the High Roller Club. The links are below, and I hope to see you guys soon. 15 minutes later, we start this hand 7-handed. Under the gun limps. The hijack raises to 15. The cutoff calls. I call in the small blind with pocket 5s. Big blind folds. Suddenly, the under the gun limper limp raises to 65 with a stack of about 1,200. This is music to my ears. We get to set mine for an incredibly cheap price, and we know the under the gun limp raiser most likely has a monstrous hand. On top of that, he's most likely an amateur. His limp raise was way too small for the number of players in the hand, especially with his bad position. He should have raised closer to like 100 at least. So for the $65 price tag, the hijack calls, the cutoff folds, and I call in the small blind. We go 3 ways to a gorgeous flop of 9-3-5 rainbow. We flop middle freaking set on an uncoordinated rainbow flop.
I win!
Let's freaking go! I start with a check. Under the gun c-bets for 125 into the pot of 215. The hijack folds. Alright, no reason to play sneaky or beat around the bush. Against a recreational player whom we suspect is most likely holding a massive overpair, there's almost no chance he'll fold here. So I put in the good old-fashioned check raise to 285. Our opponent pretends to tank for about 45 seconds. Then, as we knew he would, he puts in an additional raise for about half his stack. I snap shove all in, and he makes the call. The turn is an inconsequential 7 of diamonds, and the river brings in a very safe 3 of hearts. Our set of 5s holds up, and our opponent shows he was unable to fold pocket queens, so we finally win our first big pot of the night to inch closer to even. A few minutes later, we're down to 6-handed now, since I just knocked out our last opponent. Here, I open to 15 in the middle position with pocket 9s. The low jack folds, but the hijack 3-bets me to 50 with a full stack of 1,500. He's an Asian pro that I haven't battled in a while, but I think I used to battle in the past, since he knew me by name and recognized that I now have a vlog. Oh no, man, all those Asian people look the same. So here, everyone folds, but I make the call. The flop comes 5, jack 5, rainbow. I check. Our opponent throws out a very small down bet to 35. That doesn't necessarily signify strength or weakness, since this flop is incredibly polarizing. If our opponent has an overpair, and I'm holding a jack here, I'm only drawing to 2 outs. The same applies if I have any pocket pair, kinda like the very exact one I have. But for this price, I'm not about to fold just yet, so I make the call. The turn is a 4 of diamonds, keeping the board rainbow and not changing a whole lot. So I check again. Our opponent increases the heat with a bet of 125 into the pot of 175. This is the same move I would make in his shoes, regardless of what I was actually holding. Start with a small down bet, and then increase the bet sizing on the turn to get all the small pocket pairs to fold. So knowing that, I call once again. The river is a king of clubs, demoting me to 3rd pair. Now a hand like king queen or ace king gets there, and on top of that, the jack already had me beat anyways, so of course I can only check again. Our opponent fires out a 3rd barrel for 185, which is an incredibly milky bet. He's more likely to bluff here with a massive overbet. He wants a call from me here with a bet of this sizing. So knowing that, I'm not going to oblige. I make the fold, and he's nice enough to show us that he had pocket aces, American freaking Airlines. So we lose this one, and I play for another 40 minutes or so without making much progress, so I decide to cash out since it's getting near my 4-hour expiration mark. In for 3,300 and out for 3,112 for a small loss of $188 after 3 hours and 49 minutes of playtime. I'm proud of the fact that I was able to leave at the appointed time instead of trying to get unstuck for those last few dollars to break even, since we all know how atrocious I play when the hours stretch on just a bit too long. I mean, the game is starting to get short, and there are several other pros on the table, and the casino is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's no reason to try to make up such a small loss, meanwhile running the substantial risk of playing suboptimally. So the very next night, I play another session. It's Thursday night, although technically Friday morning, since we don't start until 2:03 in the morning. Again, we're playing 2-5 no limit hold'em at the Wynn Encore in Las Vegas, where I bind for 1,500, which is 300 big blinds. A few minutes into the session, we're on a 6-handed feeder table. The hijack opens to 15. I call in the cutoff with Queen 10 offsuit, since we have position to the original raiser and we're on a decently short-handed table. The button folds, but the small blind and big blind both call as well. We go 4 ways in position to flop a 5-7 queen rainbow. We flop top pair with a mediocre kicker. Small blind checks, but the big blind leads with a 40% pot bet of 25. The hijack original raiser folds. This is a pretty uncoordinated flop, and our kicker isn't exactly monstrous, so I just flat call, and the small blind calls as well. The turn is a queen of clubs, putting 2 clubs on board and pairing top pair. This time, when small blind checks, the big blind checks as well. That turn shouldn't have changed much if big blind had us beat, so the fact that he checks leads me to believe that we're pretty damn good right about now. Unless of course we're about to face a check raise. So I decide to throw out a non-committal 60% pot bet of 80 into the pot of 135. Surprisingly, it's the small blind that calls and the big blind that folds. The river brings in a 9 of clubs, completing the backdoor flush. 6-8, the most obvious open ender, also makes a straight. So when the small blind checks again, I don't beat a whole lot given this run out, so I just check the action back. You guys have seen me go for thin value with second pair all the time, but here I'm going to check back top trips. You need to be accustomed to what sorts of runouts are bad and which ones are favorable. So the small blind tables his hand and he shows deuce 5 of clubs for the backdoor flush. I lose the minimum. Our opponent hits his backdoor flush, but he doesn't get paid out. Now imagine if the river had been a 10 of clubs. That's why I don't suggest being on a draw on a paired board, especially out of position no less. Imagine if I had a hand like pocket 7s and he's just drawing completely dead on the turn. A few minutes later, under the gun limps. I raise to 25 in the cutoff with ace-king offsuit. The button calls. Suddenly, the small blind 3-bets to 100. He's a Chinese pro I played with recently for the first time a few days ago. I have positioned to the 3-better, so I'm not gonna go anywhere for this price. I make the call, and the button calls as well with a short stack of about 300. The flop comes 6, 7, deuce with 2 spades and a diamond. Small blind checks. This is a really amazing flop for a big overpair. I see no reason for our opponent to check here. He can get calls from a vast array of smaller overpairs, like 8s, 9s, etc. So I think he has a hand like ace-queen, or possibly even the same hand I'm holding. But you know what he doesn't have? Position. So I throw out a 2/3 pot bet of 200, which is almost exactly how much the button has left. This makes it seem like I don't mind getting it all in with the short stack. However, the button could have any number of hands that we have beat, and considering he didn't just shove pre-flop, there's a good chance he only has a weaker ace-x type of hand, or suited connectors which completely break the flop. So thankfully, our evil ploy works, as both opponents fold. We get this one through. It's been 35 minutes since the last hand we played, and we've since been moved to a full 8-handed main game. Here, under the gun limps, I raise to 25 in the middle position with ace-jack of diamonds. The low jack, cut off, big blind, and under the gun all call. We go 5 ways to flop a 4, jack, 7, rainbow with 1 diamond. We flop top pair, top kicker with the backdoor flush draw on a pretty uncoordinated board. The action checks to me. I throw out a 60% pot size c-bet of 75 into the pot of 125. The low jack, cutoff, and big blind all fold, but the under the gun player suddenly puts in the check raise to 175. Usually check raises are terrifying. However, this particular opponent has been playing weak hands super strong, betting huge with hands like top pair and no kicker. I can't imagine him having a very strong hand on an uncoordinated board like this, and I do have position, so I make the call. The turn is an absolutely gorgeous 4 of diamonds, improving our hand to include the backdoor flush draw. Our opponent leads again with another really strong bet of 425 with a stack of about 1200. If I call here, the pot will already be over 1300, and our opponent only has about 800 behind. I suspect our opponent only has 2 to 3 outs if he's holding a weaker jack, depending upon if he has a diamond or not. With how strong he likes to play his hands, I'm not sure if he has a fold button or not on his screen once he flops top pair. I mean, I guess I could just smooth call here, but bro has already put in over $600 already. Even though I think our opponent only has between 2 to 3 outs to win, he still has several chop outs due to the turn. If the river is another jack or another 4, we'll end up chopping this pot. So with this in mind, I just shove all in. Our opponent tanks for over 2 full minutes. If he had a hand like jack 7 suited, he would have long since called by now. The way this hand has played out, I'm never gonna have a 4 here. He's only realistically losing to an overpair with such a hand. So I'm definitely rooting for a call here. Eventually, our opponent does put in the fold, saying that he's folding jack king. We don't get the call we were hoping for, but still, I'm not going to be mad about being up $840 in less than an hour into the session. Almost a full hour passes before we play our next notable hand. Here I open to 15 under the gun with jack king offsuit. The middle position, cut off, small blind, and big blind all call. We go 5 ways to flop of jack, 3, 4 with a diamond and 2 clubs. We flop top pair with a great kicker. That's a pretty darn good flop for our hand holding. Small blind and big blind both check. I start with a strong c-bet of 55 into the $75 pot. The middle position folds, but Tom, the Frenchman and a fellow professional poker player, calls in the cutoff. The blinds both fold as well. We go heads up to a turn, which brings in a 9 of spades, not changing a whole lot. If I had ace jack or better, I would bet again, but since I'm pretty close to the bottom of my range here, I do a bit of pot control with a check. Frenchie throws out a bet of 125. I don't think Tom would bet here with a flush draw because he knows I wouldn't bet into 4 other opponents with air, so he definitely has a jack of some sort. I'm beating hands like 10 jack and jack queen, but losing to a hand like ace jack, so I just make the call. The river is the deuce of diamonds, changing absolutely nothing. If anything, it only improves my potential hand holding, since I could have ace 5 of clubs here, but it's very unlikely that he does. If I arrived at this river with a missed flush draw, I would absolutely bomb the crap out of this river card with a huge overbet. But since my hand does have a lot of showdown value, I just check again. Tom checks the action back. We table our hand, and it's good. About 20 minutes later, under the gun limps. I limp in the middle position with queen 9 of diamonds. The small blind folds, and the big blind checks. So we go 3 ways in a limp pot to a flop of 2, 6, 7 with 2 hearts and a diamond. Big blind checks. Under the gun leads for a slight overbet of 20 into the $15 pot. I decide to get frisky here with 2 overs and a couple of backdoor draws. I do not recommend mimicking this play style. I will only very occasionally pull moves like this since I have position. So I make the call and big blind folds. The turn is an 8 of clubs, improving us to an open-ended straight draw. 4-5 makes a straight. Suddenly, under the gun checks. I think he just has a pair of 7s at best. I start laying the groundwork for a river bluff, assuming we miss. I mean, so long as we take the betting lead here, we can later represent that 8, any random big cards on the river, the front door hearts if it hits, and not to mention our actual real outs, like a queen, a 5, or a 10. So I shoot out a very strong pot-sized bet of 50 into the pot of $55. With only 1 overcard to his most likely hand holding, our opponent makes the call. The river is a 3 of diamonds. We brick out completely. Suddenly our opponent comes out firing, but for a very small amount of $50. This is almost definitely a blocker bet. He expects us to fold all of our missed draws. Unfortunately for him, we recognize it for what it is, so I put in a substantial, but not overpowering, raise to 200. Our opponent snap folds. The dealer starts clearing the board, but I have him spread it back out so you guys as the viewers can see what we were working with, even if it's not exactly in the right order. So before the start of this next hand, our last table has broken. I go and diddle around in the 1-3 for about 15 minutes while waiting for a seat to open, since I didn't draw high enough to get a seat immediately. This hand happens about 40 minutes since the last hand we played. Here, there's a live 10. I open to 35 in late position with Jack King off suit. Only the big blind and straddle call. We go 3 ways in position to flop of 8, 3, 10 with 2 diamonds and a heart. We don't flop anything at all except 2 random overcards. But since we have position, when the action checks over to us, I start with a 2/3 pot-sized bet of 75. A 10-eye flop is not that good for our range, or our actual hand holding for that matter, but once in a while, I'll throw out a curveball from left field. We don't want to play exactly the same 100% of the time, and we can't have our opponents getting a good feel of how we play. I mean, I've been playing at the Win Encore for almost 9 years now. I wouldn't be nearly as profitable if I played in such a manner as to be predictable. I mean, I see a lot of the same pros and regs all the time. The regulars would have all since caught on to my playstyle by now. So, for my substantial bet, the big blind folds, but the straddle calls with a starting stack of about 2,200. The turn is a 9 of hearts, putting 2 hearts on board, and giving us a very sneaky open-ended draw to go along with our random 2 overcards. If I had bet the flop with Jack Queen instead of Jack King, I would have just turned the nuts. There are now 2 different flush draws on this incredibly dynamic board. What would I do if I had an actual big hand, like pocket 10s, instead of the garbage hand I'm currently holding? I mean, this board can't get too much more dynamic than it currently is. So I decided to throw out a slight overbet to the tune of 275 into the pot of 255. Again, without taking too much time to think about it, our opponent makes the call. Come on, let me hit one time. Just throw out like a black queen. You guys have gotten this far and watched through this really long video. Help me out here. Smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Your positive energy will help the dealer throw out a black queen. I just know it. Come on guys. 3, 2, 1. Let's do it. Friendship. Okay, so the river comes and it's a deuce of diamonds, completing the front door flush. Not only do we brick out completely, but if our opponent were on a flush draw, he just got there. Instead, our opponent checks for a 3rd time. Okay, strategy time. With how absolutely strong I've been playing my hand so far, any flush that hits this river should have thrown out an incredibly large bet for value. I mean, imagine if we really did have a hand like Jack Queen or pocket 10s. It'd put us in a really bad spot, wouldn't it? So no, we didn't hit that black queen we were hoping for. Heck, we didn't even hit a black 7. Maybe if more people had hit that like button. But now I'm sitting here with king freaking high. What is a man to do? Well, if my opponent had a strong hand like 2 pairs, he's really gonna hate seeing that river. He's gonna think that either we already had him beat or we just got there. Our only option to win now is to continue blasting at this pot. So I throw out a bet that's just scary enough to get a fold, but also screams that I want to call from anything less than a flush, putting $650 into the middle. Our opponent tanks, and tanks, and tanks some more. 5 freaking minutes passes before someone eventually calls time on him. Here, let's listen to the original audio as Mark the floor man makes the countdown to see what our opponent decides to do.
10 seconds remaining. When we get to 0, your hand will be dead. You will not have an option. 5, 3, dead.
At this point, I've been playing for about 3 hours, counting the time I spent diddling around at the 1-3, and my Friday nights are usually super busy since I almost always play on the Absolute Nuts live stream at Resorts World, so I figured it's a good time to cash out and head home for some much needed sleep. In for 1600 and out for 3308 for a delicious profit of $1,708 after 2 hours and 59 minutes of playtime. I may not have done so well on Wednesday night, but I didn't let it get to me and was able to recover massively after a super rocky start. Thursday night, I did a whole ton better. I saved money on hands where I was beat, and I got some pretty massive bluffs through. If this is the sort of content you enjoy watching, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and all that jazz. Also, come check out my Patreon if you want to help support the channel. There, for a very modest fee, you can check out all the coaching videos I've made so far. And if you want some personal one-on-one coaching, you can reach out to me through Instagram or via email. As always, I hope to see you in the next video.